After a devastating divorce, bankruptcy, and the debts that had eaten away at my life, I bought an old, very cheap house on the banks of a river in a remote part of Oregon. It was a spacious wooden house overlooking the river directly, and the price was suspiciously low. I moved in completely alone and started working at a small boat repair shop nearby. In the first few weeks, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Every evening I would sit on the back porch, listening to the sound of the river, convincing myself that I had finally started a new life. About 3 weeks in, things began to change, slowly. I'd wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was watching me. I'd go out to the porch with a powerful flashlight, but I'd see nothing but the thick fog on the river's surface. One night, I saw the faint beam of a flashlight on the opposite bank. The light moved slowly, then disappeared the second I shined my own light toward it. The next morning, I found large, clear footprints in the mud right below the porch, the tracks of someone who had stood there for a long time. Then walked parallel to the house. I started noticing disturbing details. The tools in the garage were arranged differently. My pack of cigarettes would disappear, only to reappear in a strange place. I began checking the locks and windows more than 20 times every night, and sleeping with my handgun under the pillow. One night, I woke up to the sound of heavy, slow footsteps on the wooden porch. I rushed out immediately, but I found no one. Yet, on the floor, there was a large wet patch, and beside it, a clump of fresh, chewed tobacco. The smell of old sweat and damp clothes started seeping into the house, especially in the living room. I'd sit for hours in the dark, watching the river, my heart pounding, wondering, is someone sneaking in at night? Is it a drifter? Or is it someone specifically targeting me? By the end of the 4th month, the terror had taken over every moment. I'd wake up standing barefoot in front of the river, with no memory of how I got out. Once I woke up swimming in the cold water, up to my waist, with the current trying to pull me under. I got out with great difficulty, shivering. I started finding wet fingerprints on the outside of the window glass, very clear ones. Sometimes, I'd find my personal belongings outside the house. An old photo of me lying on the bank, my favorite shirt, wet and torn, hanging from a tree. One night, I heard a voice calling to me in a rough whisper from the middle of the river, pronouncing my name slowly and clearly. I went out with my shotgun. I didn't see anyone. However, I heard branches snapping very close by. I started to fear myself. Am I sleepwalking and doing these things? Or is there a real person trying to hurt me or drive me insane? I stopped working and started spending all my days and nights inside the house, watching the river, clutching my weapon, and listening for any sound. The exhaustion made me lose the ability to think clearly. I felt like the person watching me knew my routine, knew when I slept, and when I was at my waggest. Now, 8 months later, I've reached the point of no return. I sleep for an hour or two at most, and I always wake up at the edge of the porch, my body leaning forward, with the water touching my toes. In the morning, I find new footprints, closer than ever before. Sometimes, they reach right to the bottom steps of the porch, and I also find cigarette butts of the same brand I smoke, but they aren't mine. Last night, I woke up standing in the water up to my knees. I didn't feel the cold. I heard the whisper, so clearly. It wasn't from the middle of the river, but from right behind me, from the direction of the house. I turned around slowly, but I saw no one. Yet, I heard light footsteps moving away in the wood. I hurried back into the house and found my bedroom door open, even though I always lock it. On the bed, there was a black, wet coat I had never seen before. I'm sitting in the living room now, writing these words with the gun on my lap. The river is flowing quietly outside the window, but I know it's no longer the only danger. The danger is inside the house too. I hear the sound of faint breathing now. Very close, maybe in the next room, maybe right behind me, and I no longer dare to turn around. I was driving on Interstate 40 in rural Arizona, just past midnight. It's that kind of road where the GPS signal dies, and your only companion is the glow of your headlights cutting through the black desert dark. I was on a long trip, driving back from California to Texas, after attending my friend's father's funeral. I was exhausted, but I insisted on pushing through. I told myself, just one more hour, and I'll pull over at the next exit. Then it happened. Suddenly, an old pickup truck swerved into my lane as if it were aiming directly for me. I jerked the wheel hard, the tires screamed against the asphalt. And the world flipped, metal shrieked, glass shattered, and my SUV slammed into the guardrail before rolling once into the ditch. The airbag hit me in the face, and a terrifying silence fell, broken only by the sound of leaking coolant and my own jagged breathing. I blacked out for a few seconds, but when I woke up, my leg was pinned under the dashboard. Blood was streaming from my forehead, and the desert night was so quiet. It felt wrong. No other cars, no sirens, just the stars above me and the smell of gasoline mixed with desert brush. I reached for my phone, dead of course, smashed in the crash, and started screaming for help into the void. That's when I first noticed the sign, partially buried in the sand a few feet away. Frequent accident area. Drive with caution. It looked old and faded, but something about the fresh scratches on the guardrail right next to my car made my stomach churn. I managed to drag myself out of the broken window, ignoring the pain shooting through my leg. And that's when the real nightmare began. The road was completely empty. No tire tracks from the truck that hit me, as if it had vanished into thin air. I crept closer to the guardrail, flicking on my dying flashlight. And that's when I saw the first one. Dark, small spots on the asphalt, not from my car. Blood. Old blood. Dried, but clearly visible under the light. I kept wandering around the wreckage, recalling news reports about missing drivers in this part of the Southwest. The way the wind carried a distant howl, maybe wolves, maybe something else. Memories of my family waiting for me back home. The physical struggle with my injuries, and the desperate search for supplies in the debris. Hours passed and no one came, even though I heard a distant hum of traffic, as if the road were split into two different realities. The fear started to creep in. This is a major interstate. It's supposed to be busy even at night, but here, the void was swallowing everything. I noticed the old blood stains were everywhere, some looking very fresh. It wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. I felt a chill run through my bones despite the desert heat, realizing I might not get out of here alive. Hours passed as I sat leaning against the wreckage, my leg throbbing with pain, my mind cycling through every worst-case scenario. No one came. Not a semi-truck, not a state trooper. I decided to crawl up to the main road using a piece of the broken guardrail as a crutch, leaving behind my own blood trail, mimicking those old stains. That's when I started noticing the details that didn't add up. The guardrail wasn't just scratched, it was layered with years of collisions, some new, some rusted, but all focused on this exact quarter mile. I found a smashed side mirror from another car buried in the sand, and the glass still held a reflection that made my skin crawl. Because it wasn't mine. A little further back, behind some tumbleweeds, were personal belongings. A smashed woman's phone with a family photo on the lock screen, a child's shoe stained with fresh mud, and what looked like drag marks leading away from the road, out into the desert. My heart hammered against my ribs as I connected the dots. This wasn't random. Memories of highway disappearances in the Southwest flooded my brain. Stories of drivers crashing and never being found, dismissed as exposure or animal attacks. But the evidence here pointed to something deliberate. I heard a low engine sound approaching and waved frantically. Relief washed over me as headlights appeared. An old tow truck pulled over. The driver was a man in his 50s. His face tired, but he wore a kind smile and a baseball cap that read, "Desert Recovery." He helped me into the cab and radioed for help. But as we slowly passed my wreckage, he whispered something about, "It happens all the time here." I asked him about the blood and the belongings. He ignored the question at first, then muttered that the desert takes what it wants. His voice was too calm and made me deeply uneasy. We drove slowly, and I noticed the radio played nothing but strange signals, and he kept checking the rearview mirror. When I asked about the nearest hospital, he replied, "The closest is far, but there's a place nearby where they can help you." I started noticing scratches on the truck's seats that looked like claw marks, and a faint smell of dried blood. The road felt longer than it should have been, and the stars above looked alien, as if they were watching. I tried to call for help on my smashed phone, but he took it from me to fix it, claiming he'd call my family. The real horror set in when I saw small photos taped to the dashboard in the glow of the instrument panel. Faces of smiling people, some looking exactly like the people in the photos I'd found at the crash site. The man began talking about drivers who don't want to keep going in a way that made my blood run cold. The road stretched on, the man talking with eerie calm about past accidents, each one matching the description of what I'd seen. We arrived at a small roadside building that looked like an abandoned service station, but it was lit with dim lights. He helped me down, but inside there were others. Men and women wearing similar clothes, looking at me with a strange look, half pity, half something else. They said they were the local response team, but they didn't call the police or an ambulance. They gave me water that tasted strained, and I started to feel dizzy. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. And in the back room, I saw piles of smashed phones, suitcases, and blood-stained clothes. I asked them why. One answered calmly, "The road collects, and we keep the secret." I realized these weren't paramedics. They were a group living off these crashes, perhaps causing them or exploiting them to steal from victims. Or something worse, organ trafficking or illegal experiments in the remote desert. I tried to escape, but I was too weak. The man who saved me flashed a cold, chilling smile and said, "You're part of the story now." I heard cars approaching outside, but it wasn't the police. I'm writing this from a secret location. I escaped by a miracle, but I know they're looking for me. My family has probably already been told I had a fatal accident, and they never found a body. The road is still there. The old signs are waiting for the next victim, and the desert night hides secrets no one is meant to know. Will anyone believe me? Or will I just be another missing person on the I-40? I bought a used laptop from a Craigslist ad in the small town of Green Valley, Michigan. The price was way too good, only $180, and the guy who sold it, a man in his 40s, claimed it belonged to his cousin who had left suddenly and needed some quick cash. We met in a Walmart parking lot. I paid him in cash, took it in an old bag, and headed back to the apartment I'd rented after my divorce. That first night, I charged it and booted it up. The system looked clean, but I noticed a hidden folder labeled archive_backup_2023. I tried to open it a few times, tried a bunch of passwords, but it turned out to be something simple. It opened with Family First 87. Inside the folder were hundreds of files, photos, short videos, text documents, and Excel sheets. The first image was of a girl sleeping in her bed, taken from an overhead angle like the camera was hidden in the ceiling. Then, a 47-second video. The girl enters her house, moves around in the kitchen, and then the lights go out suddenly, and you can hear the sound of faint breathing. The files were organized by dates and names. Every victim had a complete dossier: address, workplace, daily schedule, family members, even their sleeping habits. I read notes like, Subject 14, sleeps with his window open, lives alone at 124 Oak Street. I looked up the names online and found that more than 7 of them had been missing for months, and the police were writing them off as runaway cases. I sat there all night reading, the horror seeping into my bones. The apartment that had felt safe suddenly felt cramped and exposed. I remembered every time I'd gone out over the past few days, and I wondered who had been watching me. The guy who sold it to me was so calm. Maybe he was testing to see if I'd open it or not. The next morning, I made a backup on a flash drive and went to the police. I went to the local police station with the entire laptop. Detective Davis, a tall, quiet man, listened to me with interest, reviewed some of the files, and then said, "This looks serious. We'll keep it for the investigation." I left feeling relatively relieved, but they didn't take my statement fully and told me to wait. That same night, I got a message from an unknown number. "Thanks for returning the archive. Why did you open the files?" I froze. I hadn't given anyone my number. The next day, I found a brown envelope on my apartment doorstep containing printed photos of me inside my home while I was opening the laptop, and me at the store. I went back to the police, furious, but Davis told me the investigation was ongoing and that they'd returned the laptop to me that morning via a courier, who turned out to be a young officer they'd sent. I took it back, but now I knew. The police were part of the problem. I kept checking the files and discovered encrypted emails between the laptop's previous owner and others, talking about deliveries, payments, and new subjects. The network was bigger than I thought. A local private security firm using the data for blackmail, or worse, human trafficking in the Midwest. I tried to escape to a hotel in a neighboring town, but a black car followed me the entire way. I went back to the apartment and found the door slightly ajar, with all my belongings neatly rearranged. My coworkers started asking about my health in a strange way. I'd sleep holding a knife, listening to light footsteps in the hallway. The horror was completely real. It wasn't ghosts, but a system of ordinary people controlling this small town economically and through security. Every person who smiled at me on the street might have known my daily schedule. On the third night, there was a quiet knock at 3 a.m. I opened the door and found the man who'd sold me the laptop, standing there with 2 other guys. He said with terrifying calm, "I knew you were curious. Most people sell it without opening the archive. You read everything." They pushed the door open and walked in. They snatched the laptop quickly, forced me to sign a voluntary bill of sale, and gave me pills to relax. I woke up in the morning and everything seemed normal, but my phone had messages from X saying I was under constant surveillance. I called my family and they told me they'd received an email from my account saying I was moving to another city and didn't want to be contacted. I tried to run again, but I realized the network extended to neighboring cities. I'm writing this from a cheap hotel room on the highway, looking over my shoulder every minute. my body is falling apart, and fear follows every step I take. Maybe Green Valley is just one small branch of a bigger operation across America, where people use used electronics as traps. I don't know if I'll survive or if I'll become one of the missing in the official reports. If you're reading this, never buy super cheap used electronics, especially in small towns. I didn't get away. I just became part of the archive now.